Oh man, bear market. You know what I'm talking about? Woo! Pro tip, you're not going to navigate this by trying to stay on top of things. You're going to navigate it by getting to the bottom of things, relaxing, using a process, and making a judgment call. But hey there, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. If you're new to the show, I'm just taking a sigh. It's a rough time when you look at the news, isn't it? If you're new to the show, this show is dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement by getting the money side of it right. That's important for sure. But it's about helping you have the confidence to lean in and rock retirement, even if you're in a bear market, which can be hard. It can be hard. Have you looked at the news lately? Have you read the Wall Street, gone on to Google Finance? Inflation, interest rates, bear markets, bad economy, political craziness, 24/7. It's scary trying to stay on top of all this stuff. And it doesn't really help you in your individual journey. Let me explain why. There's this concept called the police blotter effect, meaning that if you are exposed to everything going on around you, especially on the negative side, it impacts your psyche and how you live your life, your happiness. And trying to keep on top of things, we're inundated with what's happening in the US and Britain and China and Ukraine and Russia 24/7. And our mind, even though intellectually we get it, our mind, our psyche doesn't distinguish between things happening that are way away from our journey and what's happening right in front of us. We think of it all the same, and that takes a toll on our psyche, our confidence. That's the police blotter effect. Let me give you an example. So I live in and around Fort Worth, Texas, and have for about 32 years, the majority of my life. My son lives in downtown Fort Worth. I've had an office in downtown Fort Worth. I love Fort Worth. This is a safe city. I've walked a lot of the neighborhoods and gone to a lot of the places. I have no problems. Yeah, go downtown. It's great. Go have fun in a neighborhood. It's fine. The other day, I pulled up the police blotter for Fort Worth, Texas, and they did a Q2 2022 report, so April through June, and they've had over 4,125 offenses just between April and June, 3 months. 3,754 assaults in Fort Worth, 980 of them aggravated. Kidnappings and abductions, they had 66 kidnapping and abductions in 3 months, over 20 a month. 29 murders, about 10 a month. 272 sex offenses in 3 months. I read this. I don't feel as safe in Fort Worth. This isn't the concept I have of Fort Worth. Yes, these things go on, but imagine if I had a website that I went to every day that reported on all of these things happening, these 10 murders a month, telling me the story of the people, talking about the perpetrators, pontificators pontificating about trends and safety and all these other things. And that was what I read here just in our little area of Fort Worth, Texas. How safe would I feel? Now scale that to your state, to your country, to the world. And that's what you're going to consume if you try to stay on top of things. That is not a healthy way to make decisions because it all is going to impact us the same. We're not going to feel safe. And we're going to have a lot of emotions going on that are going to color our decision making. So it's not about being safe. It's about staying on top of things. It's about getting to the bottom of things. So when you are feeling some of these emotions because you're inundated with all of this news, I want to refer you to an acronym that actually comes from the addiction recovery world, and it's called HALT, right? It literally means to stop. Take a minute, evaluate how you're feeling, what could be triggering you before you act. So HALT, what does it stand for? And these are situations, these are that you want to evaluate for yourself before you act. Hunger. Are you angry or anxious? Are you tired or lonely? Are you tired? HALT. When you're feeling some of those feelings, you're not in the best stage to defend against urges to act. And so you want to check yourself. And you also want to pull yourself out of the police blotter effect and stop consuming so much stuff that really isn't going to impact your journey specifically. So how do you get to the bottom of things? That's where you want to have a very well thought out process that you follow consistently and you double down on when times are hard. Just when times are the hardest is when you have to be even better at following your process so you can relax, use a process, and make a call. And we're going to describe that type of process, the one that we use and the one that we teach, on 2 live meetups where you and many other people like you are going to join, and we'll walk through that process and hopefully give you some help on your journey. And we're also going to talk about the open house for the Rock Retirement Club, where we teach it and guide it in depth with the members. And so you can register for this at livewithroger.com. We're going to have 2 sessions, Thursday the 27th at 7 p.m. Central, and then Saturday morning the 29th at 11 a.m. Central. And we'll frame what this process should look like so you can take yourself out of the police blotter world and get to the bottom of things for your individual journey. So come join us at livewithroger.com. Hey, now let's get on the show and talk about your questions. All right, we're going to continue with answering your listener questions. And then at the end of this, we're going to have a chat with Danielle Roberts from Boomer Benefits, because we're coming up on Medicare choices here at the end of the year. So I wanted to have Danielle on to help frame how to think through your Medicare decisions logically so you can get to the bottom of that as well. So that's what we're going to do today. If you have a question for the show, go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger, and you can leave a written question or an audio question. Pro tip, audio question, we try to get to the front of the line. And with that, we're going to get to our first question, which is an audio question from Dave on bonds versus CDs.
Hey, Roger. It's Dave in California. I'm 66 years old, about 2 years into retirement. I have a pretty standard stock and bond mix ETF portfolio with about 60% in stock, 40% in bonds. But I'm wondering, with CDs getting up to close to 4% for a 1-year CD, are people starting to move some of their bond portfolio into CDs for guaranteed 4%? Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Dave. And this is not really an option we felt like we had over the last number of years, right? With rates where they've been. I haven't seen a 4% CD yet, but they've definitely come up. 6-month Treasury, last I looked, was close to 4%. A 3-month Treasury bill was over 3.6%. That's pretty attractive. The answer, Dave, really depends on what the money's for. Because even at these rates, you're losing money to inflation, even if you can get a 4% CD. And we're in this period of transition where rates are increasing. But it comes down to what the money's for. And this goes back to getting to the bottom of things, having a process. So when you have a feasible plan, okay, I know I have enough money with, given all the assumptions that this should work out. This would be what we call the resilient phase of the process. So when you're choosing what you should own, you want to have your contingency fund, which is like an emergency fund, some buffer. And then we suggest that you have a minimum of 5 years of pre-funded consumption. So this is money that you're going to need year by year. So if you need, say, $60,000 from your investment assets in year 3, you would want to make sure you had that come due in year 3. And this way you can pre-fund your consumption. It's just like you would do if you owned a business and you had a payroll account. You would keep money aside so you can make payroll. It's your payroll for yourself. For those investments, I do not suggest that you have bond funds or balanced portfolios or things like that. I suggest that you have individual assets that mature right around the year or before you need them. So you could use CDs, you could use treasury bills, you could use TIPS, you could use multi-year guaranteed annuities, you could use individual bonds. All of those are appropriate because you want to try to match the maturity to when you're going to need to pay your bills, use the money. When we get beyond this income floor, Now we're talking about long-term money, right? So now you're sitting in a position where I have clarity of how the next 5 years of my life is going to be paid. When we get beyond that, you could still have a portfolio that had a mix of stocks and bonds. For that portion, I would I would suggest, because I can't recommend to you or anybody, I don't know you, I would suggest that you stick with, whether it's an ETF, whatever your bond allocation is supposed to be, I would likely stick with a managed, diversified index or whatever it is that you choose to use, rather than try to buy individual bonds, et cetera. Now, you could still do it buying the individual ones. It just adds more complexity to it. But the reason I would say it's probably fine to stick with a manager or a managed index fund of some sort is because what's happening is interest rates are rising. Those investments are getting interest from the bonds that they own in their portfolio, and likely those are reinvesting back in to buy more shares and at lower prices right now because they're getting hurt. Those funds will continually get more money in through 401k investments and other investors, and that money will go to purchase new bonds, and bonds within that portfolio will mature, which will give the manager a chance or the index a chance to buy more bonds at the newer, higher interest rate environment. So over time, that will work itself out. And since we've segregated that managed bond portion to 5 years plus at least, we have time for that all to work out. So we don't need to get too cute with that. And so that would be how I approach it. Hopefully that gives you some wisdom. Now, Larry had a similar question, and so I wanted to address that. And Larry says, I have 2 years of needs and wants and wishes in cash, and I have stock funds for money I won't need for 10 years. My issue is with the middle piece of this pie cake. While we were enjoying low interest rate environment, people are advocating the middle bucket be full with balanced funds or bonds. Now with rising rates, the stock and bond markets are getting decimated, he says. We could be in a situation for many years, and people will burn through their cash and have to sell their bonds at a loss if that is the majority of their middle bucket. So how do you navigate this? What do you use for this? And Larry is asking a very similar question with a little bit different twist. Well, in this middle bucket, Larry, let's assume we need that $60,000 in 3 years, and you have a $60,000 individual bond, whatever type, or a CD that matures in 3 years. The intent is to spend that money. That's going to fund your payroll account to pay your bills because you've determined that's how much you need from your financial assets. So that actually is the intent of that money. And because you bought I never advocated buying a balanced fund or bond funds, even in low interest rate environments, because of this risk that we're seeing right now. What if it's down when I need it? We don't want it to be down when you need it. We want it to be there when you need it. And so that's why you do want to own individual things, because they will mature at their par value. So you know what money you're going to get back at maturity. So I would not use those type of things. And then over time, since you're going, in our verbiage, we're using an agile approach, you would continually reassess what your cash flow is going to look like and make decisions of, do I keep building this out, and how do I keep building this out on an ongoing basis? So hopefully that answers your question too, Larry. Be careful out there mountain biking. So our next question is from Steve on charitable gift annuities.
Hi, Roger. I've been listening for several years and love the show and your approach to preparing your listeners for an heroic retirement. I listen to several retirement podcasts, and I have yet to hear any host talk about using charitable gift annuities in retirement planning, especially when we are beginning to start thinking about ways to produce guaranteed income for life. For those of us who know that charitable giving will be part of our estate plan, a CGA is a great way to secure guaranteed income and leave the residual of the annuity to charity at the death of the last spouse, if we're married. Additionally, there are tax deductions at the time of funding, and much of the income going forward is also tax-free. I know you are a proponent of charitable giving in an estate plan, and I'm curious what you think of using charitable gift annuities. Thanks for all your good work.
We definitely need to do a theme on more of the tactical things you can do from a charitable giving standpoint, because this is a really complex topic. There are a lot of things that you can do. So you bring up charitable gift annuities, and I think they're totally an appropriate tool in the toolbox for the right person. right? So let's talk about how a charitable gift annuity works. So you would work with a larger charity to set up what's called a charitable gift annuity, including getting a personalized estimate of what your income and tax impact would be if you made this donation. And then you would make a lump sum donation to the charity. The charity sells or invests the donation, and you get an income stream for your life or the life of you and your spouse. And at the end of the last person, the charity retains the remaining of the funds. And so it's a way of working with the charity to create an income stream for you, but also make a charitable gift for the remainder assets based on how you have it structured. And some of the pros of this are you're supporting a charity that you care about. You could reduce or avoid capital gains on appreciated assets if you use those in your giving. You can donate many types of assets, even real assets. You're going to get an income stream that will be determined using some actuarial tables for you or your spouse. You're going to get an immediate partial income tax deduction as part of the income stream for life that is tax-free, because there's going to be some calculations on what the potential value is for the remainder part, and that's the part that you'll get the tax deduction on. Some of the downsides of them is that you're going to have a substantial amount of money to do them. When you do these, you are doing them permanently. You're likely to get less than if you were to buy an annuity or some other type of traditional annuity. And like most annuities, the payout value is fixed, so there's no adjustment for inflation. And the payout's going to be partially taxable because you're going to be taxed on the gift that you're actually getting back in terms of the cash flow that you're going to receive. And if you support multiple charities, there could be some complexity if you have to set up multiple. I think they're a great tool for the right person, especially if they're larger gifts and you have highly appreciated assets that you're willing to give up permanently as part of a gifting strategy. So Steve, I think they're great. I think they're a good tool. I've never used one. I've never had an instance where we pulled out this tool to use it, because there are so many other ways to give to charities, whether it's donor advised funds or annual donations, etc. But it's definitely an appropriate tool to look at. Our next question comes from Catherine about finding advice on the road to retirement.
Hello, my name is Catherine, and I live in a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are not retired yet and may not be so for a while, but we do want to get our affairs in order in preparation for that. The reason why I'm calling is to ask for help in finding a financial, I don't know the exact word, is a financial planner or financial advisor, but we want someone that will help us look at our portfolio and not to make decisions for us, but to give us advice on like what we're overweighted in, and especially the tax implications of 401ks, IRAs, and things like that. So thank you so very much.
So Catherine, I think what you would be best served by is looking for a certified financial planner that works as a fiduciary only, meaning they're not selling commissionable products. Now, as you approach this search, the majority of them are going to want to work with you on an ongoing basis and manage the assets. That is the predominant model of the industry. But there are a number of certified financial planners that are fiduciaries that will work on an hourly basis or on a flat fee basis to help you create the project, figure out all the answers, and give you the tasks to go do. And those can range in cost from younger ones that charge less than $1,000 to all the way up into the $30,000+. It's all going to be based off of their competency, their experience, their business model, etc. In searching for them, it can be a little bit difficult because the majority that you're going to find are going to maybe do some of that, but then really try to get, it's a loss leader to get something else. So that can sometimes taint the type of engagement. Places that you can look. One is, I know recently we started doing flat fee retirement engagements. That's like a short project where we help someone think through it and you get it all memorialized in a document to go implement on your own. You can go to Retire Agile to learn more about that. Limited capacity there, but we're doing that. You can also go to NAPFA, NAPFA.org, which is the National Association for Personal Financial Advisors. That is an organization that are fee-only fiduciary, and there are a number of them that work on these contract basis. A lot of what the project's going to look like, it's definitely going to want the business side of things, but the investment part of it shouldn't be the hub, Catherine. And if that's what they're talking about mainly, it's probably not the best fit, because there are a lot of things that are much more important to that. Because if you think of the phases of your project, you have your vision, what it is we want, call it goals. And then you're going to want to have a plan that's feasible, meaning given the resources I have, I know these goals are feasible for me. And then you want to make that plan resilient. And then you're going to want to optimize it. And so a good process should go in that order. And if it's all about investments, that's really towards the back of the bus, because you can't really inform what you do before you get these other things right. So there are some suggestions, and they are out there, but you're definitely going to have to be proactive in your search. Okay, we have one last question here from Ron, and he says, "Greeting Roger and team from sunny Chicago." Love Chicago, Ron. Your program and podcasts are outstanding. Last week, you recommended that we update our personal financial statement, which we did over the weekend. Anyway, the vast majority of our funds have been converted to Roth versus traditional pre-tax assets. Therefore, since one is a tax-deferred category and the other is tax-free, shouldn't they be treated or weighted differently when assessing the true value of your financial statement? Keep up the good work, Ron. That's a very insightful question. So what he's referring to, when you build a net worth statement, you're going to put the value of, say, the money in your bank account. I got 10 grand in the bank account. And then you have an IRA where you have 10 grand. In this IRA, you haven't paid taxes on yet. Ron's wanting to know, well, wait a second. That 10 grand in my IRA isn't necessarily 10 grand because I haven't paid taxes on it yet. If I'm in the 20% tax bracket, then that's really 8 grand, not 10 grand, right? This is true. They have not been taxed yet, Ron. And this is where trying to get more precise doesn't necessarily get you more accuracy. The net worth statement isn't meant to be that precise. It's meant to give a list of your assets so I can identify what buckets, tax deferred, tax free, taxable, what the sizes of those buckets, how they're growing over time, where you're allocating assets, what your debt picture looks like. It's not really meant to be that precise. And when you get into taxes, there's a timing issue, right? Because you don't know what the tax brackets are going to be and what the timing of realizing those funds and having them taxed are going to be, right? You may be today, Ron, in the top tax bracket because you're working, but you may take that IRA out when you're in the 12% tax bracket when you're retired. So it's much more fungible because we just don't know. But I think getting to that level of precision isn't really going to get us any more accuracy for what we're trying to do with this net worth statement. Now, when you're actually planning out how you harvest all this, Ron, you do want to have a model and a process that's robust enough to make these tax estimates so we include taxes in the withdrawal strategy that you have. And a lot of software tools do that. In the Rock Retirement Club, we give all members access to the one that I use in my practice that automatically does a lot of this calculations. So you can try to optimize this. But you're technically correct, but I don't think we need to worry about it for this particular exercise. So hopefully that helps. Now it's time to go set a... Wait. We're not going to set a smart sprint. We're going to go talk with Danielle Roberts from Boomer Benefits. So Danielle, it's been a while. How are you doing?
It has. I'm great. Thank you for having me on again.
Since we last talked, it seems like there's been a lot of change happening behind the scenes that probably impacts Medicare in ways that we might not know. So I wanted to make sure we had you here for a quick update. So what's the state of Medicare and what's going on this year?
Well, we had some sweeping changes that were brought about by the Inflation Reduction Act, which should help Medicare beneficiaries quite a bit with the cost of their prescription drugs. This kind of reform is needed, and many people have heard me say over the years that Part D will drive you nuts because you come from employer coverage, you just pay a copay for your medications, there's typically no deductible, and then you roll onto Medicare Part D and you pay a premium for the coverage, but then you have a deductible, and then you have copays and coinsurance, and then you have this thing called the coverage gap or the donut hole, and nobody knows what that really means, and we have to pay more when we get there. And then even when you hit catastrophic coverage, you still pay 5% of your medications afterward. So Part D coverage has been certainly good because before Part D rolled out in 2006, people on Medicare had nothing for outpatient medications. But also there's often confusion and dissatisfaction with the plans because they just work so differently than what people are used to. And in a small group of the population, if you are taking, let's say, a specialty medication or an oral chemo medication, that medication runs $5,000 a month or $8,000 a month, getting to catastrophic coverage and still paying 5% for that medication is very difficult for many people. And so we never want to be in a situation where we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And this reform has been needed, and now the new legislation will certainly help with that.
And so what are the changes specific to prescription drugs? Let's talk through those.
Yeah. So what we're going to see rolling out is, first of all, the vaccines that currently fall under Part D, which cost people money, especially the shingles vaccine, will now be covered at 100%. So Medicare has vaccines that fall under Part B and vaccines that fall under Part D. The vaccines and preventive care under Part B have always been covered at 100%, but people are very surprised to find out they have to get certain vaccines like the shingles vaccine through Part D. And some Part D plans have a $480 deductible. So even if you were a pretty healthy person and you hadn't spent a lot on medications throughout the year, you go and get that vaccine and you're spending hundreds of dollars in the deductible, which results in sometimes people not getting the vaccine and being at risk for developing painful shingles. So the first thing we'll see roll out in 2023 is going to be that correction. So people will pay less for that. And then the next most important thing is insulins. So a few years ago, carriers were allowed to start offering insulins for a $35 copay. And some carriers were doing this. They would create Part D drug plans where certain insulins would cost $35. But now Medicare will require that all insulins are covered at a $35 copay, not just the ones that you inject yourself, but even those that might come with an insulin pump. So certainly a really important change for people with diabetes. Ready for the next part?
Well, on drugs, so we still have the 5% copay. Now I know there was talk to me about the stance on Medicare in terms of negotiating prices a little bit more aggressively. So do you have any clarity on what's going to happen there?
Yeah, we do. And they're also, when they're rolling this timeline out, it's kind of like you get a little present every year. So we're starting with the vaccines, and then we have the insulins. And then in 2024, the 5% coinsurance will go away. In 2025, they'll drop your out-of-pocket drug spending to a max of $2,000 per year, which is a huge improvement. And what's happening behind the scenes is the government is going to be getting ready so that in a couple of years, they can start managing the cost of prescription drugs by negotiating directly with the pharmaceutical manufacturer. So they're going to be looking at all of the Medicare Part B and D drugs and finding the 10 that are the most costly, that are costing Medicare the most money, and therefore likely costing beneficiaries the most money. So they'll start out with 10 medications that fall under Part D, and then they will directly negotiate with that pharmaceutical manufacturer to drive the cost down. And then every year thereafter, there'll be a few more medications and a few more medications. So the idea would be that by 2029, 2030, we have a whole group of maybe 50 or so medications that are going to be significantly less expensive than they have been in the past.
So if the 5% copay is going to go away, a lot of this is sort of the policy decisions of trying to save money. by negotiating directly. And I think of when you're talking about the 5% copay going away, I think of my wife who is not on Medicare, but she takes Humira, which is like $6,000 a month. So even if she has a 5% copay, if she were to be on Medicare, that's a lot of money in addition to everything else that you have to do.
Yeah, well, some drugs like the biologicals and autoimmune conditions, those will fall under Medicare Part B. And so if you had a Medigap plan, Medicare would pay 80% and the supplement would pay the other 20%. But if you just had straight Medicare, you'd actually pay 20% of the cost of a drug like that. And so these changes are going to help drugs that are not only on Part B, but on Part D. And yes, you're right. There are specialty meds. The one that I always notice is Lantus. This is a diabetes medication. It's not one of the cheaper ones. So in the past, we haven't seen very many carriers doing the $35 insulin for that one. They're using more generic drugs. And that drug, I've seen it where it'll ring up at the pharmacy like $600. Well, if you're somebody living on a fixed income and you've got to pay 5% of $600, that's still a chunk of change.
Yeah.
And you've already spent thousands to get there. And so there'll be millions of beneficiaries that are directly impacted, especially the ones where the doctors have them on a brand name medication and there's not a generic equivalent or there's not another medication that would treat it as well.
This is confusing when you start to get into what's under Part B, what's under Part D. And if it's under Part B, especially, there's a window of time when you secure a Medigap policy where they're not really paying attention to all of that. They're not underwriting you. And if you miss that and decide not to do a Medigap, that could really hurt you later on, even if you're not on one of these drugs initially, I assume.
Yeah, it really could, and you'd be unaware of it. And so we cover that on our website. We talk about it on podcasts like this one. It's in the book. We need to know ahead of time what we can expect to pay for our medication so that we can make a wise choice about whether we want no coverage or we want a supplement or we want an Advantage plan. On some of the Advantage plans, those Part B drugs that are any drug that is injectable or infused into you in a clinical setting is typically going to fall under Part B. Well, on a lot of the Advantage plans, they'll charge 20% for the cost of the Part B drug. So you go out and you find this great zero premium Advantage plan and it sounds really good. And your doctors are in the network and your Part D drugs are on the formulary, but oops, you missed a little blurb that says 20% for drugs injected by your doctor in his or her office. And 20% of those kind of medications can be costly. And even though Advantage plans have a maximum out-of-pocket limit, if you have a drug like that, and let's say you're going and have an injection quarterly or even 2 times a year, and the medication is thousands of dollars and you're paying 20%, you may end up spending more on that Advantage plan than you would have if you had just gone ahead and gotten a Medigap plan where you would pay nothing. And people don't know this, of course.
Well, let's pull out this soapbox for a second. Let's pull out this little soapbox for a second. When we hear about Medicare, just a normal person, generally it's via Joe Namath or Jimmy Walker and the advertisements that likely are ramping up now for Medicare Advantage. We don't see advertisements for normal Medicare, Medigap, really. It's the Medicare Advantage with the 800 number.
That's correct.
Why is that?
So I have no beef with Advantage plans in terms of what they are and what they cover. But my concern lies in consumers understanding that before they enroll. And you're right. The biggest offender would be these third-party marketing organizations. So if you see an aging sports star on television telling you that this plan is going to be a zero premium, and in fact, they're going to give you money back, and it's going to cover dental, vision, hearing, a gym membership, some long-term care stuff, and give you the kitchen sink and a pink Cadillac too, you need to be wary. And you should never enroll over a telephone and using a 1-800 number for a plan, because sometimes those types of commercials might be by an insurance carrier, but more often they are from these giant lead vendors. They run commercials talking about a benefit that might apply to 1% of the beneficiary population. So maybe if you're on Medicaid in Rhode Island, you would get what they're selling you in that commercial. But when you call and that's not you, they'll say, oh, but wait, we can tell you about this other plan over here. And it comes with far lesser benefits because it's not going to be as rich when you don't have Medicaid also. And you're making a quick decision then under a lot of pressure. And so we don't like for beneficiaries to put themselves into that situation where you feel pressure to make a change on something. You're talking to a person that you will never, ever speak to again. It's in a call center. that accepts only inbound calls. And you're going to talk to John in the whoever, Philippines or who knows where, could be America as well, but you're just going to talk with somebody out there that's trained to get a sale out of you on that phone call. We shouldn't be making healthcare decisions like in our insurance that's going to cover us for serious things in 30 minutes talking to a stranger because we saw a commercial. Instead, take some time. Go look up online. What is that commercial talking about? Do I qualify for that? Call 1-800-Medicare and speak with a navigator, or you can get a ship counselor. You can talk to brokers like us. Take your time making these decisions so that you know exactly what you're buying. And then you won't be disappointed in your plan. We have many people that like their Advantage plans, but at my agency, we go over all the pros and cons of them. So there's no surprises. And that's what we want for the public at large. Yes?
This is a little bit of a soapbox just because it is sort of a mill. I think of puppy mills, right? The attraction is the low cost on the front end. But you, if I recall, you give up a lot of optionality later on if you realize it's not really what you want in terms of going back.
Yeah.
And I forget exactly what the penalties are or what the but it's difficult to go back to traditional Medicare once you've gone to that. Am I correct in that?
You can easily get back to original Medicare, but what you can't easily get is the Medigap plan. So for example, here in Texas, if you did that, now you're past your 6-month one-time open enrollment window. And so unless you qualify for some sort of special election period, which many don't, now you have to get health underwriting for the Medigap plan. And so what we sometimes see happening is everybody loves their Medicare Advantage plan until they get sick. And then they're like, oh, I wish I had done that more robust coverage. I'm just going to go back. Well, they may find out now that this health condition that's costing them so much money on their Advantage plan is also going to prevent them from getting into a Medigap plan. So if you're really on the fence about which one to go with, you could start with Medigap, and it's very easy to go to an Advantage plan because there's no health questions ever with Advantage. But if you start with an Advantage plan, it's not necessarily guaranteed that you'll ever be able to get back to a Medigap plan with full coverage. So you want to look at those benefits in the Medicare Advantage plan and cover all your bases and make sure that it's really going to be a good fit for you.
Okay, so we're going to put that soapbox away, but I think it's an important one. And I think there's some some legal action that's happening with some of the techniques used. What else do we need to get an update on in terms of Medicare and this period of the year?
Yeah. So as we head into the annual election period, you should be checking your mailbox right now for the annual notice of change that comes from either your Medicare Advantage plan or your Part D drug plan. If you have a Medigap plan, the annual election period has nothing to do with that. So you don't even need to worry about Medigap in the fall. In the fall, if you did have a Medigap plan, what you're going to be looking for is your annual notice of change from your Part D company, or if you have Medicare Advantage, you're going to have that. Now, the annual notice of change is going to tell you all the things that are changing in your plan from this year to next year. And one good piece of news this year, if you do have a Medicare Advantage plan, is that CMS is funding them at 8.5%, which is a really healthy increase in the funding for Advantage plans. So you might find this year that when you open the annual notice of change and it tells you what's changing from this year to next year, that many of those changes will be good and in your favor. Maybe you were paying a premium and now you won't. Or maybe you were paying a $20 doctor copay and it's going to go down to $10. When they get better funding, they typically enrich those benefits to keep you in the plan and then make you not want to switch to a different plan in the annual election period.
So let's outline any decision points. Obviously, this is one you just mentioned, but what decision points will we have in this annual renewal?
Yeah. So I think it's really important for you to look at, of course, the premium, making sure that it's going to be affordable for you. Is there any change in your deductible? There could be a deductible on the Medicare A and B side. There could be a deductible for Part D, which means you're spending that deductible before the plan starts kicking in and you just pay a copay. So we want to look at that. Most importantly, we want to check with each of our doctor's offices and make sure they still plan on accepting that plan next year. And we want to check the list of drugs covered by the plan because that's one that people often miss. And so if you don't see that, and then you're standing at the pharmacy counter in January, and now you've got to shell out $100 for a medication that previously was costing you $20, you're probably going to be upset. But a lot of people don't know this, and so they don't do their homework. They don't look for another plan. The reason the carrier has to notify you of the change in September is so that in October 15th to December 7th, you could change to something else if you're not happy with what's going on out there. And this year, I expect there'll be plenty of commercials talking about great benefits with the significant funding. And I'll tell you, Roger, it's getting harder and harder for people to pass up an Advantage plan because now there's so many things thrown in there. That's why I call it a kitchen sink. All these extra little benefits. And when you're on a fixed income and there's been inflation like we've had this year, you were looking at all the ways in which you can save money. And so if you're spending $150 or $200 a month on a Medigap plan, it's pretty hard to pass up an Advantage plan with a zero premium or even a premium give back where they credit you money towards your Part B. It's hard to pass that up.
And I imagine it's a judgment call because you're getting a lot of perks and obviously the money today, and as humans, we're psychologically wired to take care of today first, that you just have to understand what potential exposure there might be if the catastrophic happens or if a big event happens. Because that's the trade-off essentially, right?
Yeah.
You're just going to bear more of those costs later, potentially.
Yeah. Looking at that maximum out-of-pocket limit on the plan, you want that to be as low as possible. So next year, Medicare Advantage plans will be able to set their maximum out-of-pocket limit. I think it's at $8,950. Well, if you can find a plan with a $4,000 out-of-pocket max, that's much better for you because you're not only spending the $4,000 potentially on the A and B side, but you also have the drug all separate, additional spending that could happen there. So we want to look at those really carefully and see if the worst thing were to happen tomorrow, what would you do? Do you have a rainy day fund? Maybe you've got money in an HSA that you carried over from an employer plan and you've got money set aside so that you won't touch it unless it's a medical emergency. Or maybe you're a diligent saver and you would take that $200 a month you might have spent on a Medigap plan and you're going to put it into a rainy day fund account every single year. When people do that, then a few years down the road, you have some health conditions, you're spending a little more money on your Advantage plan, but you're not panicking because you set up some cash over here as a reserve to help you through that.
Well, let me ask you a question then. If you are well funded for retirement and you have the rainy day funds, you have ample assets to deal with the $8,000 out of pocket, as you say, is it wise to seriously look at an Advantage plan and think of it as a catastrophic rather than go traditional?
I would say that it's a viable option. And a couple things that you would want to consider is the Advantage plans have HMO and PPO networks. So HMO is typically going to mean that if you go outside the network, you have no coverage. Are you someone that does a lot of travel or do you stay at home in your local area? So if you're not planning on snowbirding or living an RV lifestyle or spending a month a year in Colorado for a vacation or visiting the grandkids, things like that, an HMO plan might serve you if you're going to treat locally, right? If you do a PPO plan, you've also got more flexibility. So maybe you are someone that does a little bit of travel. Maybe you want to consider an Advantage PPO. So at least you could go out of network at a higher cost to you, but you are well situated for retirement. Then the only other thing to consider is with Advantage plans, they're in business to make money. And the way that they make money is controlling your access to certain healthcare services and providing preventive care. So there's a good part of that with all the prevention and extras. And then there's a part of it that might mean let's take an example. You had a mammogram and they found something. Now you're waiting for a diagnostic mammogram, but we've got to go and get a prior authorization for that. These kind of things could take a couple of days, could take a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, you're sweating whether or not you have something benign or malignant. So just know when you give an insurance company some control over your access to these services, are you the kind of person that for the amount of money you're saving is fine with that? Or are you the kind of person that's really going to consider that a hassle? I think that's the other consideration with Advantage plans. But again, that being said, I have thousands of clients on them that are quite happy with them and don't mind that part.
So basically what you described is execution risk. Are they going to deny claims or question claims or be as responsive as you actually want them to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people won't question it. There was a study that I read that was some media coverage about this, about how a lot of people, the Advantage plan would just deny the first try. And on the second try, when people appealed, a lot of time it was approved, but 70% or something of them never bothered to appeal and they just paid the bill themselves. So if you are going to run that route, if you find something that gets denied and you think that that's bogus or baloney, and you might want to be the person that takes the time to go ahead and file an appeal and get something covered. So I just feel like Advantage plans really mean that you have to be much more involved in your healthcare and the administration of that healthcare. And if you're willing to put in the time, they could potentially save you a lot of money. But there could be a couple of years out there where you might have spent more in that 1 year than you would have if you'd had a Medigap plan.
And that's the key, right? Is that it's asymmetrical when the return comes. If you have one huge year, it could wipe out tons of returns like we're seeing in the markets right now.
Yeah, you bet.
And there are great Advantage plans, as you said, so we're not beating them up, but we just want to be careful there. Any other things we need to know coming into this season and into 2023?
I think we've covered all the high points. It would be really great if we got a great Social Security increase and Medicare Part B premiums did not increase or went down. And that's actually a possibility this year because the big increase to Part B last year was due to potential coverage of that Alzheimer's medication. I think it's called Aduhelm. And then that didn't actually happen the way Medicare expected it to. So this potentially could be a year where we see those premiums actually dip. And I'll be really curious to see. So I think we have a lot of happy followers if there's a healthy Social Security increase and some savings on the Part B premium. So watch out for those notices, which are due to come out probably in late October, early November.
I forgot to ask one question.
What's that?
Do you have any visibility on IRMA and the Medicare surcharges from a policy risk and having those even be more means tested? I know the income levels adjust, but...
Yeah, we haven't had it. There's nothing that I know that has been implemented that's going to make those increases more than they were before. I don't know of anything along those lines, but we do know, yes, they will typically adjust a little bit this year, every year. So right now, those Part B IRMA limits are $91,000 for a single filer, $182,000 for married filer. Maybe next year it's going to be $94,000 and $186,000. We would want to look at that carefully. And we know that that's, of course, really important if you're coming up onto Medicare in a few years, and we need to be planning how we cash in IRAs or to convert the Roth IRAs or take severance packages. All of those are going to play into taxes that you're going to pay on Part B. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Danielle, great to see you again. We'll refresh a Medicare series here probably next year. So no doubt you'll be part of that. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Appreciate you too. Always grateful to come and be on your podcast.
With that, let's go on and set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step we can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but to rock life. All right. In the next 7 days, check yourself. Stop trying to stay on top of things. That's not going to help you make better decisions for your specific journey. Now, we've used this as a smart sprint before, and it's one of those things that we're never going to be exonerated from having to manage, myself included. I have to manage myself, and I go down staying on top of thing rabbit hole. And it's easy to get pulled into those conversations because I do have opinions about those things, interest rates, inflation, economy, possible pathways that this all unfolds. But my opinions don't matter because they're not right. I can't predict the future. I always have to come back to the process. So we're never going to be exonerated from this. So in the next week, give yourself a break. Don't try to stay on top of things. You're going to be healthier and happier and have more confidence in your plan. I want to invite you to join us live with me as we build out how do we navigate this and focus on the right things. You can go to livewithroger.com and sign up for one of our 2 sessions where we'll show you the project that we think you should build and have a discussion about why the Rock Retirement Club might be right for you. Have a great week. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.